She abandoned us for Bradley from book club. What happened when she came crawling back was. At 54, I thought the ghosts of my past were buried forever. 23 years had passed since that rain-soaked night when my world imploded, and I'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. But sometimes life has a twisted sense of humor, and the person who shattered your heart into a million pieces decides they want to glue it back together. What happened next taught me that some doors, once slammed shut, should never be reopened. The memory of that devastating night is seared into my soul like acid eating through steel. October 15th, 1999. The rain hammered our windows in suburban Phoenix like nature itself was mourning what was about to unfold. Margaret didn't even have the decency to wait until our children were asleep. She stood in our modest living room, a floral suitcase clutched in trembling hands, eyes as distant as a stranger's. I can still see our youngest, Lucas, barely 6 years old, wrapped around her leg like a lifeline, his voice breaking as he sobbed, "Mommy, where are you going? Did I do something wrong?" The words that came next obliterated everything I thought I knew about the woman I'd loved for 12 years. "I can't pretend anymore, Christopher. I need to live authentically." Her authenticity, as it turned out, was a real estate agent named Bradley from her book club. She'd been living a double life for 8 months, weaving lies so intricate I still marvel at her deception. That night, she walked out of our ranch-style home without a backward glance, leaving behind nothing but the echo of a slamming door and 3 children who would never fully understand why their mother chose a stranger over them. I stood there in our modest, lived-in living room, completely paralyzed, holding the fragments of what used to be our family. The silence was deafening. Have you ever experienced a moment so devastating that you feel your entire identity crumbling in real time? That was me, at 31, suddenly thrust into a role I never auditioned for, single father to 3 heartbroken children who were looking to me for answers I didn't have. But here's what people don't tell you about abandonment: you don't get the luxury of falling apart. I had to reconstruct myself overnight. The first 18 months were brutal. Our eldest, Sophia, a straight-A student and captain of the debate team, stopped speaking entirely for 4 agonizing months. She'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at her untouched dinner, and I'd watch her childhood die a little more each day. 10-year-old Nathan, our gentle peacemaker, started getting into vicious fights at school, coming home with bruised knuckles and a rage that terrified me. And Lucas, sweet Lucas, cried himself to sleep every single night, asking why mommy didn't love him enough to stay. As for me, I became a master of controlled chaos. I took a second job at Home Depot on weekends while maintaining my position as an insurance adjuster. I learned to French braid Sophia's hair by watching YouTube videos at midnight. I memorized every Pokemon character for Lucas and taught Nathan how to throw a curveball in our backyard until my arm ached. I cried in the shower so my children wouldn't see me break, and I forced myself to smile through parent-teacher conferences where other couples sat together while I sat alone, representing our fractured family. The whispers in our neighborhood were relentless. Some people blamed me. Clearly, I wasn't man enough to keep my wife satisfied. Others offered pity that felt more like poison, but nobody, and I mean nobody, understood the sheer magnitude of what it takes to be both mother and father to 3 traumatized children while your own heart is hemorrhaging from betrayal. And Margaret? She vanished like smoke. No phone calls on birthdays, no Christmas cards, no child support checks, not even a postcard explaining why she'd chosen to erase us from her existence. It was as if we'd been nothing more than a rough draft of the life she really wanted, and she'd simply crumpled us up and thrown us away. But I refused to let her absence define our story. I raised those children with fierce love, unwavering discipline, and brutal honesty. I never poisoned them against their mother, but I didn't sugarcoat reality either. They grew up understanding that their mother had prioritized her own desires over their well-being, and somehow, miraculously, they transformed that pain into strength. Watching them flourish was my greatest revenge against her betrayal. Sophia became a pediatric nurse, dedicating her life to healing children the way she'd never been healed. Nathan opened his own auto repair shop, building something solid with his hands after growing up in a world that felt unstable. And Lucas, my tender-hearted youngest, enlisted in the Marines, finding the structure and brotherhood he'd been searching for since that terrible night. I had done what seemed impossible. We had thrived without her. So when I opened my front door on a crisp Tuesday morning in March and saw her standing there, 23 years older, with silver threading through her auburn hair and a suitcase in hand like some twisted deja vu, my first emotion wasn't rage. It was complete bewilderment. And then, with the coldness of 2 decades worth of unanswered questions, I asked, "What could you possibly want now?" She couldn't meet my eyes at first. She stood on my porch, fidgeting with her wedding ring, not mine, obviously, and I watched her struggle to find words. "Christopher, I made the most terrible mistake of my life," she finally whispered, her voice cracking with a sorrow that once upon a time I would have moved mountains to heal. "I've come to make things right." But here's what she didn't understand. There was no making things right. Not after 23 years of silence. Not after missing every milestone, every heartbreak, every triumph. I'd begged the universe for this conversation during those first agonizing years when I was drowning in loneliness and confusion. But now I felt nothing but an arctic stillness where love used to live. "Bradley passed away 4 months ago," she continued, her hands trembling like autumn leaves. "Pancreatic cancer. I've been completely alone since then, and I realized I threw away the most precious thing I ever had, our family. Our children. She looked past me into the hallway as if expecting to see our kids come running to embrace her. "I was hoping we could talk. About us, about them, about starting over." The audacity was breathtaking. I didn't move. I didn't open the door wider. I simply studied this woman who'd once been my everything and was now nothing more than a stranger wearing my ex-wife's face. 23 years of absence, and she thought she could waltz back into our lives because her backup plan had died. The reactions from our children were swift and merciless. Sophia was the first to hear about her mother's reappearance, and her fury was volcanic. "She doesn't get to come crawling back now that she's alone and desperate," she snarled over the phone, her voice shaking with 23 years of accumulated rage. "We're not her consolation prize." Nathan's response was more controlled but equally devastating. He let out a low, bitter laugh and said, "She's got titanium nerves, I'll give her that. Tell her if she wants a family reunion, she can dig through the ashes of everything she burned." Lucas, always my gentle soul, was the most concerned, not about her, but about me. "Are you okay, Dad? You don't owe her anything. You know that, right? You gave us everything." "She gave us nothing but trauma." Not one of them wanted to see her. Not one asked about her life or her health or where she'd been. They had built their lives without her, and her return was nothing more than an unwelcome intrusion into the peace we'd all fought so hard to achieve. "I want to rebuild our relationship," she pleaded during one of our porch conversations, because yes, despite everything, I couldn't just slam the door on her. I'm not that kind of man. I made her coffee. I listened. I let her talk about how her life with Bradley had gradually turned into a prison, how he'd never wanted children, how she'd missed hours every single day, how regret had eaten her alive for 2 decades. But none of her sob story changed the fundamental truth. I looked her in the eyes and said, "They're not your children anymore. You forfeited that title the night you walked out." And I meant every word. She had abandoned them when they were small and helpless and needed their mother most. Now she wanted to return because her replacement life hadn't worked out the way she'd fantasized. But children aren't objects you can put in storage and retrieve when convenient. The days following her appearance were surreal, a tension in the air like the moments before a thunderstorm when everything feels electrically charged. The peace I'd worked so hard to cultivate felt fragile, threatened by this ghost from our past who refused to stay buried. Then one morning I found an envelope tucked under my doormat. No knock, no conversation, just a white envelope like a flag of surrender. Inside was a photograph from our early marriage, all of us at Nathan's 8th birthday party, before the betrayal, before the devastation. On the back, she'd written, in handwriting I once knew better than my own, I'm sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just wanted to say goodbye properly this time. I won't bother you again." That night, I sat in my kitchen staring at that photograph for hours. Not because I missed her, I didn't. That version of her, the woman I'd married and trusted with my heart, died the night she chose another man over our family. The woman who'd appeared at my door was a stranger wearing her face, and I owed that stranger absolutely nothing. 3 months later, I stood in my backyard grilling burgers for Sunday dinner. My grandchildren were splashing in the pool, their laughter echoing off the walls of the home I'd fought to keep. Sophia and her husband were setting the picnic table while discussing their upcoming vacation to Colorado. Nathan had just texted that he was bringing his famous potato salad and not to start eating without him. Lucas was flying in from his base in California for a surprise visit. And in that perfect moment, surrounded by the family I had single-handedly raised and the love we'd built from the ruins of her betrayal, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: complete and utter peace. Not the fragile peace that comes after surviving a storm, but the unshakable peace that comes from knowing you not only survived, you triumphed. She may have walked away all those years ago, but I walked forward. And I never, not even for a second, looked back. The family she abandoned had become stronger, closer, and more loving than anything she could have imagined. Her loss, our gain, and that, my friends, is the sweetest justice of all. Have you ever faced a moment that tested everything you believed about loyalty, love, and second chances? Sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge, it's simply living well without the people who chose to live without you.